What's going on, guys? It's your boys back here again with our 5th edition of Said Talk in Season 2. I'm your boy, Nate, and this is your boy,
Tony.
And we're here with we're going to take a more serious tone this time around for this episode. You know,
we can have fun too.
Oh yeah, of course.
That's
what the shed is about.
If we're not having fun, we definitely won't be entertained.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Yes,
well,
sir.
And on that note, we'd like to introduce to you Dauphin County Commissioner George Hartwick. Glad to have him here in the shed. I know he's been in the old shed a few times. Had some good times with my dad. Now he's here to talk some about some important stuff here. So
I'm impressed. I'm looking around. I see deer horns. I want to know if they're coming from your dad or you.
He wanted to put this out here to show you that that's something he shot. If you look back there, now it's not on camera, but that big buck contest, that was in the Patriot News. He shot it. He got the biggest buck in 2017. He was like, tell George. I said, okay, I will.
Well, I always hear about his big fish stories and big buck stories. Now
he's got a lot of stories.
I can see a couple antlers. I won't go in deep to the fireplace or anything, but it is a little chilly outside. So if we need to, we'll heat it up as we're having
that's what fire's for. You know?
Hey, this conversation might just heat it up itself.
Absolutely.
That's also true. Well, so on that note, I wanted to, introduce George. He's a family friend of ours, as well as obviously, like I mentioned, our Dauphin County Commissioner here, one of 3. And I want to kick this off. Just, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you've come from, and just a story about you.
Obviously, I was born in Steelton, Pennsylvania, on Election Day, believe it or not. It won't be any surprise to you that I was born on Election Day, which, as we know, and the first part of our education tonight, is always the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. For all of you that had civics classes, that's really important to know. And the idea of it happening on the 2nd is always very rare because, obviously Monday has to be a first and then Tuesday has to be the 2nd in order for it to occur. My brother's daughter, Riley, also was born on Election Day.
Oh, no shit.
But and some of you who my brother Andy Hartwick up at Steelton Hare, who's a bit crazy, and it's not any stretch to know that he was born on Halloween, as crazy as he is. So on Election Day and Halloween are certainly 2 distinctly different days for 2 distinctly different characters. But growing up in Steelton was something that I would not rather grow up with any other experience in the world.
Can't agree more.
For me, I actually was born with a degenerative hip disease. I don't know if you know that.
No, I never knew that.
But I walked around in leg braces for about 5 years of my life.
Wow.
Like Forrest Gump, and the idea of being in Steelton, people weren't too kind to you as you were young.
I get it.
They crack on you. I was called every name in the book, but I also knew that instead of seeing it as something that was bad, I viewed it as a great opportunity. I won every crab race over at the field.
There you go.
I remember the ability to ride my big wheel. I got pictures of me on a big wheel bike, riding the bike with my hands where the wheels were. And then I realized when I got out of those leg braces that, the idea of God expecting me to be stronger as a result. So when I shook the first hand of the person that I wrestled, I knew I had twice the strength, and that couldn't have happened unless I went through the issues that I went through. So a lot of times when we see those challenges in front of us, it's really opportunities and God's blessing. And growing up in Steelton, those challenges are things that you don't always see it at the time, and I know this in your household.
Oh yeah.
You don't always see it at the time with the child, but the idea of going through that and getting on the other side and embracing it, you see so much of a potential, and God's always trying to provide greater gifts to sharpen your tools.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it any better. Well,
that was good.
Yeah.
Those are some gems right there just to get it started off. I kind of want to go back a little bit to the community aspect. As Anthony stated, you are Dauphin County Commissioner, and you grew up in Steelton your whole life. So I'm assuming that whole entire community, because for those of you that don't know, the Steelton community here, it's a family. Like, everybody
Always
basically know
been.
everybody. You go down anywhere,
Sorry, got the roller clap.
That's the roller clap right there. You do that, So it's just basically one big family. So I'm guessing that's like something that definitely played in the position you are in now as well.
Yeah, the idea of coming from a community where we might have been from different cultures, we might have had different perspectives, but being, in a position to not have a whole lot of money, and also to understand work ethic, and the drive and the things that brought us together. I always say Steelton is best defined to me this way, that we might fight like hell amongst each other, and we've all earned that right, but you don't mess with none of us.
No.
Because we stick together unlike any other place in the world. So that experience, as well as, as I told you about my leg brace experience, I went into a Steelton midget football team. We went 60-0. We never lost a game. And then I finished out at Steelton, both doing pretty well in school, but I also was the winningest wrestler in Steel High's history, which earned me an opportunity to wrestle at Bloomsburg University, which both of you had attended. And then after coming back from Bloomsburg University, I was sitting in the barbershop, actually one of my brother's first barbershop at 23 years of age, with my brother, and not too many people know this story, Torrin Pettigrew, if you know Toot. And we were talking about, how we used to have a playground to be able to have structured activities when we were growing up. We had lunchtime. We went over to the football field from the time the sun came up until my dad blew the whistle or the street lights came on. So we talked about, no access to the river, the parks and playgrounds were down. And instead of bitching about it, we said, well, I'm going to run for mayor. I mean, what a great thing to do instead of complaining about something. Why don't you do something about it? I mean, we all, as individual citizens, should stop complaining, and we should start having more activity and action and being aware of what we can do to be able to make a difference. So, at 23, I ran for mayor and became the youngest mayor in the state of Pennsylvania. Oh, wow. At the young age of 24, and I beat a guy who was on council for a number of years. And we did a great deal of work. It's probably some of the best things I remember about public service. And first of all, if you can survive in Steelton, you can survive in anywhere. Because people are all in your business. Everybody knows who you are. And anything that happens will be out on Front Street.
They know your story.
The second thing is that, what better thing that you can do in public service than to change the town that you believe gave you the most, from how you grew up to role models to being on Mickey Minnick's 78 football championship team to having these leg braces with skulls and crossbones to all the experiences in sports and athletics. I mean, all that ties you together in a way that when you come back, it's time to give back. And we became mayor and did some great things in Steelton.
What are some of the favorite things that happened while you were mayor? Because now I'm not sure, the levels between going from mayor to where you're at now in commissioner. We'll get into that. But, what were some of your favorite accomplishments when you were mayor, especially at such a young age, with you saying that you were the youngest mayor ever in PA?
So first of all, we'll talk about the things we were able to do. We repaved every street in Steelton. What is a more important thing than to have roads and streets that were okay? We had alleyways that had these huge humps on them that cars couldn't even drive down. One of the priorities and we did something innovative. We went in with a couple of municipalities and purchased our own street paver and had our guys trained in repaving our own streets. And we left with every alley and street paved. Nice. So at least borough-owned street paved. We redid every single park and playground in Steelton. From where it had nothing when we came back, no, hell, not just nets, but it didn't even have the posts and things that were together. We redid every single park and playground. We offered access, public access to the river for the first time since the old, back in the days when you could get onto the river on the west side of Steelton. After the flood, that was all taken away, and we actually did a deal. I worked it out with a guy named John Durbin, who was the head of the Turnpike. As they were building a brand new turnpike bridge, I had gotten land that was donated by ArcelorMittal Steel, about 3.5 acres up by the pump house on the north side of the bridge. I used that in a way to be able to swap for the land on the other side, which was owned by a guy I only knew affectionately as Bud, who had his own private boat dock. In order to leverage that land, we actually used that as a staging ground to build the bridge. As a part of the transaction, we got the turnpike to pay Bud to own that land on the other side. And now all those 7.5 acres are all Steelton property with access to the Susquehanna River. I changed a lot related to our policing. We had some challenges within our police force. We made a major transition. And believe it or not, with all the economic development and changes we made, most people don't know in the mayor's system of government, in a borough system of government, the mayor has really limited power. So unlike in a city where they've got the majority of administrative power, in a borough structure of government, their only responsibility by law is to be able to set the time and way that you perform police services. Otherwise, all of the legislative, personnel, and other responsibilities lie within borough council. So back in the day, I was told you would never do anything. You're only a figurehead mayor. Well, it shows that, even though you don't have the legal authority, you can use that bully pulpit to do some great things for the overall town. And we faced some opposition there early. People said, you're never going to do anything. We replaced every single one of those council members until we had one that was, in the best interest of the town. And then we were able to really get a lot done.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's amazing things that, you were able to do for a great community. I mean, you grew up here. I grew up in the area. Like, I'm not from inside of Steelton, but it's amazing to see what's come of this of the area. And now you're commissioner of the county. So, what is that like? Like, why? What made you go from mayor to now you're the commissioner? Like, how'd you get there?
I would never be comfortable in a. First of all, I would say this. My faith is number one, and the only reason that I'm in the position I'm in, because, look, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. I've not been the perfect example of a human being, but I do know that I've never compromised any of my integrity in my job, and my focus towards public service has been unmatched. I also know that the smartest people I know they have a lot to learn. So I spent a lot of time really understanding the roles that I was required to do and elected to do. There's a lot of people that don't even understand the difference between an election process and a governance process.
Right.
They're two distinctly different processes. Like, to get elected is, like, in my view, like a sports event. You got to get a strategy, you got to raise money, you got to put the right team together, and you got to outwork your opponent. You got to beat them to every street corner, you got to be up with a better plan and a message. The governance is way harder. And most people think when you win an election, somehow that's victory. And I think that is only the beginning of the work. The election process is only allowing you to do the job to help people.
Right.
And folks get that twisted all the time. There's all these people that want to do nothing but talk about themselves politically and be involved in campaigning, and they can't do shit in the job that they're elected to do. I spent a significant amount of time, especially early in my career, understanding public finance, economic development, the ability for me to understand the structures of unions, police force, grievances, standard operating procedures, everything that I was required to know as mayor. And then before I ran for county commissioner, which is probably, in my opinion, and I serve now, I represent all Pennsylvania counties to the rest of the country for all county matters. And I've done that for the last 6 years. For me to be able to understand the ideas of what it takes to run county government took me 3 years. So before I started running for county commissioner, and this is the truth, I've studied county government, both the personnel, all of the funding sources, the ability to understand the regulatory requirements, the governance requirements, long before I ever decided to run for that job. So when I stepped into the role, not only did I have a lot to learn, continued, but I had a base and foundation of every single person that worked for the county, what the issues were they were facing, how we were going to change the funding structure, how I was going to rewrite the law in many cases to be able to change the way practice goes. Because one thing I do know about government, as you change the money, so does change the priorities. So if you can understand how to change the level of resources and engagement and the funding that comes to the levels, and I can give you a couple examples of this if you want to hear.
Hey, I love that. I would love to hear that.
So for me, one of the biggest issues when I came into county government, I was really frustrated by seeing how many kids we had in juvenile placement. I believe that first of all, we needed to be more diverse in the county. We weren't representative of the communities that we served. And also, I think we were sending too many kids into formal placement in institutions. When I first started, it was up over 400 kids that were in Dauphin County. And I viewed that as sort of like the farm team for the adult system. And a lot of these kids, I knew their families, I knew the community they came from. And quite frankly, I think we were ensnaring kids in the wrong way and having them be sort of following a trend where we weren't providing what was necessary for the barge principles, which are supposed to be for community restoration, education, but also public safety.
Right.
All we were using was the excuse of public safety to be able to hang kids up.
Right.
So I had started out investigating a way for us to be able to change both the perspective of the courts, which is most important. And I'm finding out as I get involved in more and more government, you really have to understand other people's roles, not just your own, and then influence them in order to become champions of issues you know are important.
Right.
So a lot of these things aren't just about you on a crusade. People make it about them all the time.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's about you bringing awareness to an issue, allowing the right people to be in charge of that kind of change, educating them on the possibilities, and giving them all the credit. So that's really what I see is wrong with a lot of things that are going on. Everybody wants the credit, but they don't want to do the work.
Exactly.
But in this case, we changed to the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative, which was a real progressive ways to view kids based upon their risk level.
Right.
So when we were first into this discussion about juvenile justice,
What's up, guys? Tony here from Shed Talk to give a big shout out to our sponsor, Jokes on Us. As you can see, I'm rocking a little bit of his gear here. Jokes on Us is a clothing brand of the Jokes LLC creative company. Their mission is to inspire and instill confidence in those who have been laughed at, misunderstood, and overlooked by the hands of normality through design, art, and fashion. And here you can find their website. Jokes on Us gear ranges from ready-to-wear basics to upcycled and reconstructed clothing, created in the city of Philadelphia. The goal is to inspire people to feel cool enough and to spread positivity and speak on important issues, because the joke is always on you. So check out their website at jokesontheworld.com. The link is in the description below, and make sure to use our exclusive discount code at checkout for all Shed Talk listeners. Jokes on Shed Talk for all 10% off select items. We like you, we love you, and we'll see you next time in the shed.
we actually were doing things like Scared Straight. You've seen that kind of stuff on TV where somebody comes in and goes, "You're gonna be my bitch for today. You better never do." You know what? The idea of that, adults were feeling good, but when kids went back to their peer groups, you know what they're saying? Man, shit, I can handle that. So it raised their mentality about what they need to act like versus never exposing kids to that level of issue in the first place. It didn't do any good. It increased their risky behavior. It didn't decrease it. So we have changed to a whole evidence-based way of doing a youth level survey analysis. Instead of people's opinions of you, we now have a criteria that doesn't base it upon your race, where you're from, who you're from. They're looking at your risk levels, and they're associating what your risk levels are with the level of treatment that you get. And we have an alternative program now where we force people into ways that they're not going into the legal system. So today you want to hear results. Instead of over 411 kids in placement, as of Monday of this week, we have 51. So the idea of reducing kids in formal places not only saves money, it keeps them engaged in school, it keeps them engaged with their family, but it also provides much better pathway for community-based rehabilitation than them to be at some state institution away from family, school, falling further behind, and then coming out with more risky behavior. So
I mean, you're exposing them back to a normal. People make mistakes, and even at a young age, we all have done dumb things. Like, it happens, but like keeping him in confinement, what's that gonna accomplish?
I like how you touched on too about how, like basically the end result was to be able to have a path for the kids, for the youth to be able to, succeed. And also when that happens, that's also showing their community cares about them. So that makes them want to be able to say, hey, Stilton looked out for me. They kept me on the right path. Even when I went left and right off the wrong path, they kept me straight. Why not get back to the community to help the next youth that might be like that person to make sure that they're on the right path?
Well, kids only respond to what they see, and if they believe, they don't listen to what you say. They watch what you do.
Right.
And if they see that my behavior is heading this based upon their own experiences, what other ways are they going to have to be able to change their own expectations? As you said, when you invest in kids, when you show them other opportunities, when you let them know people in their family have succeeded, it may not just be about what's going on inside their own home, but they're both have the genetic makeup to succeed, and people will invest in them, showing them ways that they should have different expectations for them. You'd be surprised at how kids who went through serious bad situations are more resilient and achieve at higher level.
Right.
So
not at all.
Yeah, because that is something that like I know from being on different sports teams with a variety of people playing football up in college. That, like you said, like you don't know where the kid comes from. You don't know really their home situation. If like a place like Stilton, like you said, you gotta be able to hold your own. You might fight, you might fuss, but at the end of the day, you love each other. And if somebody from an outside community, from their community, might not understand that, they might be, lock the kid up or something. But it's like, instead of doing that, like how you've been saying, let's make the kid do better and like, but let's not talk about it. Let's actually be
Do
about it. Yeah, that's.
I'd have been in
actions.
jail when I was a kid. I got in so many fights, and we were in all kind of mess. I mean, like the times are so different, and unfortunately, we don't have the same kind of tolerance.
Yeah.
And also, kids, in many ways, I don't know if you guys have watched this, but this is something to the audience. There's a Netflix documentary that's just changed my life recently about the priorities and the mindset of our current generation. It's called The Social Dilemma. If anybody ever
wow,
heard
I've
that,
heard about it.
Ever
Yeah,
watch
I
it?
haven't watched it yet.
you really should, and the influence that both your handheld devices and these platforms have on the way people respond, react, and are influenced. But that's only one way that our society has changed, becoming less tolerant to kids. The idea of the way people talk to other folks, and the idea of showing a lack of respect, even when you're talking about older heads. My dad could not be mentors to these young guys because they view it as disrespect. I don't see it that way. I see it as kids are angry. They don't have the ability to communicate in an effective way, and the way that they're expressing themselves is out of wanting attention, and they act harder because people have let them down so many times. And the reason is to put up a blockade. It's not about disrespecting somebody else. It's about putting up a blockade to keep everybody else away, to stop them from being hurt again.
Right.
So the ideas of how old heads may view kids versus what they're really shouting out for. We also need to understand where people are coming from and not judge them in that way.
Absolutely.
Times have changed, and so should our thought process.
Absolutely,
Exactly,
it
yeah.
should. Absolutely.
Yeah, because you're so true. That is so true. Because like you said, a lot of people, they do kind of makes them act harder because they don't want to be disappointed again. And that just kind of builds up that anger and that kind of mindset that it's them against the world, and the world's just not for them, which is like, it's hard. It's just kind of hard to change their mindset. Yo, man, there are people out there that do want to help you, that do want you to succeed. But
that social dilemma piece, don't get away from that.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, the only two industries that believe that we are called users are the drug industry for drug dealers and the social media industry. The idea of influencing us in the way we do what we do with our time is crazy, and we need to address that from a policy level.
Absolutely.
Now, while we're still on social media, I kind of actually want to ask. I've been meaning to ask you this. Just kind of how over the years, just how social interaction has changed, just like how we've been talking about. Back in the day, it was like you said, we'd be out until the street lights come on to your parents say, come on, you're out there riding your bikes, you're going over to a friend's house every day. And now, like especially over the past decade, everything is just so technology based, where a lot of people are hiding behind their phones. A lot of people communicate via FaceTime, text messages. So how are you able to kind of battle through the kind of how technology is and kind of how interaction has changed? That way you're able to gauge the community and also to engage with them. That way you can know exactly what needs to be changed and what you can improve.
Number one, by listening. Instead of talking all the time, you actually hear what people are saying and the way they're communicating, and always understand. Like I said in the beginning, you always have something to learn. So my kids teach me all the time that I'm not hip and I'm not up to the new terminology. So I'm trying to understand that the way people are communicating changes, and we need to understand how that works and the most effective way to do it. And sometimes it doesn't happen by just us doing it.
Right.
And then you have to also engage in those platforms and technologies to be able to reach people. And you could do it actually in an inexpensive way. So, the ideas of folks being resistant to it, I completely get it. I'm not a social media fan related to some of the ways it makes people think and the time wasted and the fake news. The fake news is constantly being perpetuated on social media. But, if you want to get information out about drug and alcohol or mental health or children and youth, what better way to be able to put it on somebody's handheld device where they're scrolling in the middle of the day watching some court show? You know what I mean? So the point is, the audience you want to reach is there, and why not use those mediums in a way to drive people to resources, ways they can access help, and also ways to communicate directly with people. So I think it can be an effective tool, but I think overall, from what it's done to the community perspective, I think it's been an absolutely horrible medium.
It does. It definitely does make it tough. I know just from like last year was the first year I was able to try high school coaching with football over at Middletown, and me and Anthony, like, we're in our early 20s and everything. So obviously the social media aspect, that's something like we've grown up with. That's something that's basically been a part of our whole life. And to kind of see the guys that like the coach, it's like that social interaction is just completely different. Because before it was like, you can come up, talk to anybody, say this and that. But nowadays it's like, you like you said, you really gotta listen to people and make sure you're kind of reading them, because one thing, you might think you're saying the right thing, and you could be saying the right thing, but you could be saying it the wrong way, which might have that person shut down, and then it's even more of an uphill battle to get them to open up when you might have to try a different avenue. You might have to take a different approach. That way you're able to listen and understand them, just to make everything better for everybody.
You can't be all things to all people either.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
In
you
social
can't.
media
Exactly.
day, people expect you to be on their side of the issue 100% of the
Yeah.
time. And the truth is, we've got differences among us on every topic. And just because I different, and the thing about this, the social experiment that I know has really not done well for our society is we can't debate about things we disagree about. It becomes
No,
you
we
or
can't
me.
at all.
You're either with me completely or you're against me, and that is
Right.
not a healthy way to be able to have dialogue and come to some agreement and understanding.
Yeah, and I've talked to Nate about that even off camera. Like, there's always something. The four of us are going to disagree on any topic that we can bring up. That's somehow, some way. We're able to sit here as adults and be mature and have these conversations because it doesn't matter what we, it matters what we support because it matters to us. And expressing that to anybody, expressing that to somebody, that shouldn't be a controversial thing. Everybody's allowed to voice their own opinion.
But you know how on social media you got some keyboard muscles.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Oh,
so
yeah.
the idea of disrespecting somebody during a conversation is easy when you don't have to face them, because you have all kind of muscles when you don't
When
have to
you're
look
behind
at
the camera,
somebody
right.
face to face and express your point of view or view. So, and then it becomes personal, and then instead of having it be about facts and debates, they want to make it about something that cuts you off and is embarrassing, and that's just not, again, a healthy way to be able to gain understanding and dialogue. So
Obviously, we all know the election is coming up. And I don't care how you affiliate either side. I wanted to bring George here to talk because obviously we would have a great conversation, one, and two, the importance of voting is something that I've always personally felt is something that's not stressed enough. People are so, you're pushed to either side. It doesn't matter what you support. It's really, things have been pushed. They're not getting to the facts of so how to find out the actual knowledge. So, I wanted to bring George to ask some questions. I know part of the job of the commissioner is in voting. So,
And real quick, and another reason too why we wanted to have him here is because when you think about kind of where we're all at, obviously we know a lot of people that are out here watching, y'all around me and Anthony's age, fresh out of college or, graduated a couple of years ago, we're 25, 24. So when you really think about it, we only had one real chance, where we were out there to actually vote. And now, I know, myself included, I'm not ashamed to say, I know, the first time around, I was just kind of all nonchalant, whatever, it's voting. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to do it, whatever. But then this time around, it definitely feels different, especially being a little mature, a little bit older. And it's oh shit, this is important. So that's another reason why we want to have him here too, just kind of to be able to stress the importance, whether you're a person that before, you were knee deep in knowing the hows and twos and what's about voting, or you're a person, like I just said, like myself, that might have been, la-di-da-di-da, it is what it is, just be able to just give you some insight. That way you're able, again, we're not going to tell you what do whatever you want to do, but just so you can do your part. That's kind of the main thing. So
yes, it is. And on that, so for you, George, I know you deal with voting in your job, and you have a lot of knowledge with this. Currently, how many people are registered in the state of Pennsylvania to vote, if you have that knowledge, or even just Dauphin County, for example?
well, in the state of Pennsylvania, is about 8.6 million registered voters. So it's a larger state.
Yep.
And I believe there's an advantage. I think there's 4.2 million Democrats and about 3.3 million Republicans. So there's about close to a million voter registration difference in Pennsylvania. However, based upon turnout in elections, it's one of those states that is a complete toss-up state.
Right.
They call it a purple state because it's not red or blue, and it's a swing state because obviously, as goes Pennsylvania, so does the national election. So the ability to come into a state that is, from a turnout perspective, relatively 50-50. The individual who is able to pull Pennsylvania into the victory column is usually the president that has won historically almost every one of our national elections. So as goes Pennsylvania, so does the rest of the country.
Okay.
And in Dauphin County, we've got about 180,000 registered voters, and with a voter registration edge of as of today, I think about 13,000 Democrats in favor over Republicans. So again, another state or another area that is completely a toss-up. There's only so many of those across the Commonwealth, as you know, in the southeast. In those states, it's almost all Democratic voting, and even if there's a larger Republican registration, they have a tendency to vote Democrat, even though they may be registered Republican. In southwestern Pennsylvania, out towards Pittsburgh, there may be a higher registration in Democrats, but traditionally now in national elections, they have voted largely Republican. So two distinctly different parts of the state with the largest population centers. Although be it registration isn't coordinated, they do vote based upon tendencies of being more conservative or more liberal. Scranton, where Joe Biden is from, obviously is a larger Democratic area, but again, surrounding is all Republican. And then you've got Erie up in the other corner, which in the city of Erie is largely Democrat, but the county is a Republican-controlled county. So really a diverse state that has all of the national tendencies, and quite frankly, if you're able to influence the state one way or another, it's usually reflective of the way the national trends are going.
Okay.
Wow. And when you kind of put that in perspective, like saying, there's a million in the whole state of PA, there's a million difference of voters, which kind of party everybody's swaying to, just like people gotta think about that. Like that, it may sound like a million, may sound like a lot, but when it's a whole population, that's really not a lot of people. Even like you said with Dauphin County, 13,000, that's.
But it is dictated as you're taking a look at election results. If Philadelphia has a big turnout, Democrats win. So if you see the Southeast with, let's say 80% turnout, 85% turnout or higher, that usually means the Democrats will win the state of Pennsylvania because that concentration is the largest population concentration. But if you see a turnout coming from Philadelphia below 50%, it usually means a Republican victory. So that's, if you're looking at these things and responding, those key areas based upon who shows up to the polls and who's done now in this election mail-in ballots is a key indicator of who's motivated their base and who ultimately has shown up to vote. Because again, voting is not about just identifying the people who support you, but the most important thing is, and hopefully what we're talking about today, is getting them to participate by actually casting their vote in the process. It's one thing to say, yeah, I support you, man. I don't think I've ever met somebody that hasn't supported me. Well, there's been a couple of doors where people have slammed on my face, but everybody says they voted for me. And it's interesting, even in Dauphin County's race with 3 commissioners, most people think that you can vote for all 3 commissioners. You can only vote for 2 in the race of commissioners. So I don't know how many times people have come to up to all 3 of us and said, I voted for all you guys all the time. Now I don't say anything in response.
It's like, which one didn't you vote for?
And did you really vote?
Right.
So I can always go back to our voter registration rolls and determine whether or not that person did vote in the election. Anybody can be able to review that public information. So be careful when you say you voted for someone. Make sure you vote. And I don't think there could be any more importance that's stressed on this. People in this country, it's what separates this democracy from any other democracy in the world, and certainly has made us. What do they say? It's imperfect, but it's the most perfect democracy that's been set up to date. Even though we always can make improvements, but it does not work without citizen participation and without voters' participation. And folks don't understand how much power they have. I can't tell you this enough, but some bad politicians have been elected by people that have stayed home. I mean, if we want to bitch and complain, and if you want to say you don't like what's going on, the one sure way that you to ensure that process continues is not to vote. So, I don't want to hear people complain about the process, complain about our future, complain about what goes on. As a taxpayer, you always have a right to voice your opinion, and you have the freedom of speech. But if you want to change the way things are going, if you want to change the priorities, you need to engage in this process to ensure that your voice was a part of the efforts that control things. And guess what? In many elections, one vote has made the difference. So that's another common misconception. What's me is one person going to make a difference, in this world of 8 million voters?
Yeah.
How does my one vote count? I can go through history and point out significant elections that were won by one vote or less. And they happened in this country. I've got a listing of probably 20 historic elections in Pennsylvania and this country's history that have been made and won by just one vote. And in one case, the person's wife did not show up, and they actually ended up losing the election.
Wow.
And their kids were of eligible age. So don't underestimate what the power of one vote can do. And if everybody has the attitude that your vote doesn't count, it certainly doesn't. And I will assure you like this, it will not count if you do not vote. So, and if you want an opportunity to participate in a representative democracy, you need to vote. People have died for this cause. Folks have, from the civil rights movement to women's suffrage to ensuring that every American has the right to vote. Don't take it lightly. It's a right that we should all exercise. And we're going to talk about a national election today, but don't underestimate the importance of local elections. I mean, they are what affects you the most, from your local taxes. We talked about the idea of your parks and playgrounds, your roads, your infrastructure, the ability for you to have good schools, the ability for you to have the things that you pay for as taxpayers. And that happens mostly at the local level, yet most of us couldn't tell you who your township commissioner is, who your mayor is, who your school board directors are. So, but while this national election has us all hyped up, and hopefully we're using it as an opportunity to set record levels of engagement, remember those local elections are probably the most important thing that affect your daily life.
I 100% agree with that. I think people are too caught up. We touched on it in the social media earlier. People are too caught up in reading about Joe Biden and Donald Trump. They don't remember anything else. They don't even understand that. I would honestly say most people don't understand how civics work because they're so worried about, okay, this guy makes the decision, the current president. That's not the case. There's from a local level to a state level to a federal level for that reason, and I don't think people are that informed about it. Like at that. So for you that's been in the government, where can you find true fact, true articles, information on who to vote for?
Well, that's a tricky question because, there are so many people that are trying to influence your opinion.
Right.
And so, there are a couple of individual sites that may provide fact-based information, like the League of Women Voters. I mean, if you really want to go and find out some fact-based information, you probably won't be able to find it on the national election because, again, even some folks would argue that some of those organizations are left-leaning or right-leaning, and they may not give you all the facts as they see them. And in a social media world today, as we talked about with fake news and the inability to get that proper information, what I would suggest is people spend, and I also say, the drop and decline in real journalism. The idea that each paper is now pressed under a social media constraint to be able to be moved by advertisers. And just in the same way as this social dilemma, which I keep referring to, you guys got to check it out.
Yeah, I got to watch this.
Is a business driven by the monetization of your time on a handheld device. So therefore are the media outlets, and they're all being played by advertisers who are trying to push certain things, and also a group that may be heavy power influencers on the left or the right. So I think it's very difficult these days. And what I would suggest is you take time to read on both sides of these issues, and usually the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And there's other levels of fact-checking and organizations, but also your local county elections office. As we talked about, there's multiple levels of government. The ones that are responsible for running elections are the counties, at least in the state of Pennsylvania. There's 67 counties. Each of them have a Department of Elections, and that elections department makes decisions based upon the rulings of the election board. So the election board consists of the 3 commissioners in the county, and that is what governs and runs all elections throughout the state of Pennsylvania from the county's perspective. So we have an elections director here in Dauphin County. It's a guy named Jerry Feeser, and we have beefed up significantly the level of investment into the elections process this year. And we talked about, as we first started out, all the changes that are going on.
Right.
So as a organization in CCAP, we have talked about not doing the changes that were being pushed by the governor during this presidential election. We believe that making changes on machines, making changes to the process, being under scrutiny of the Department of Justice for handicap accessibility should all wait until after a presidential election. We had machines in Dauphin County that you couldn't break into if you were in the middle of Red Square. They were not hooked up to the internet. There was no way to be able to access them, and they were 100% accurate. And there was no issues of fraud. As a matter of fact, based upon my discussion with 67 election directors across the Commonwealth, I was hard-pressed to find one real issue of fraud that was making a determination we needed to move in a whole different direction.
Right.
So for us, it's adding to the confusion of this election. So now in 67 counties, the Department of State has mandated that we all are required to have new machines that are certified by the state. So not only have we had to undergo those additional expenses, but now voters have to undergo a completely new experience for them to come at the polls. And for me, while they provided a paper trail for someone to have an audit trail, which was the main purpose of trying to transition these machines, also some of the technology that existed, which I don't think affected Pennsylvania machines. But the idea of us going back from a machine that we used to press buttons that were electronic to putting circles on a piece of paper, to me seemed like a step backwards.
We're going backwards.
Like, it's the days of Stilton where they used to give you a coin and a beer token, but you had to come out with a blank ballot. Now, obviously, things have changed, and there's not that kind of fraud that's being able to occur because of the level of change that were made to the machine. But we've taken a step backwards. Add to that a pandemic, which has stopped us from being able to have the level of volunteers. The people who volunteer for elections and serve as the judges of elections, the individuals who are minority and majority inspectors of elections are usually senior citizens. Based upon this pandemic, they've got a real fear of being in close proximity, and for good reason. They're at high risk. So a lot of those seniors have said to the Elections Bureau, we are not volunteering anymore. So we have had the challenge to go out and recruit an entirely new volunteer group, which also is not trained on new machines. Again, they have limited training. They're not the folks who've been here for the last 40 elections in many cases. Some of these folks, this may be their first election they're working. So again, I like experience, the ability to have the same folks at the election. Then add on to top of that, the Department of Justice has just come out, particularly in Dauphin County and counties across the state of Pennsylvania, to require us to make every polling place handicap accessible. So we have had to change out of our 162 polling places. We have 162 polling places and precincts in Dauphin County. We've had to change at least 50 of those to be able to meet both the requirements, and in the pandemic, there are several locations like senior facilities, that daycare facilities, they don't want anybody around because of the threat of COVID. So that has charged us with changing a number of additional polling locations. So the place that you went to, here's the facts, and hopefully this is why we're here today. The place that you used to vote at may not be the place that you currently vote at. So make sure, as you're hearing this telecast, you would contact the Dauphin County Elections Bureau and ensure that your polling place is not changed. There's a comprehensive listing on DauphinCounty.org and our ability to show where all of the election polling places are. That's one way to ensure that you know where you're going to be voting at. We've also sent out new voter registration cards to everybody where their polling places have changed. We want to make sure you know where your polling place is, so it's critically important to ensure that if you went, for example, I'm trying to think here, I don't believe has changed in the first ward. It still remains at the firehouse, but the Ninth Ward in Bressler, which is largely by where Dauphin Highlands is. It used to be at United Church of God out here, right on, what is it, Chambers Hill Road?
Hill,
That has changed now to Dauphin Highlands Golf Course. So there's been multiple changes that happen right here in Swidara Township that you need to know, that quite frankly, you need to know where you're going. So that's one of those changes. The second thing is the process of the mail-in ballots. The State Department and the request a mail-in ballot is something that you have to take the initiative to do, or to contact the Elections Bureau, Dauphin County Elections Bureau, to be able to request a mail-in ballot. What confuses this, and it's very simple. All you have to do is request a ballot. They will then send you the application. You need to fill out the application and then receive your ballot. Once the ballots are received, by the way, ballots will be going out in Dauphin County this Friday. So I think that is October 2nd.
October 2nd, yep.
So they will be mailed out starting October 2nd. There were a couple of court cases that were removing folks from the ballot, so we couldn't send out an official ballot until those things were finally approved. But they will be going out this Friday and continue to go out up until 2 weeks prior to the election.
So y'all hear that, right? Because, like he said, when we recording this right now, because this will drop, now it's Monday. We're recording this on Tuesday. So the second will already pass, but like you're hearing George talk about, like this is all some crucial information that you guys definitely, if you get the chance, listen back for sure. Make sure you're paying attention to where you, like you said, where you vote, and pay attention to some of those deadlines. My fault, I just wanted to just throw that in there. That way nobody listening is confused.
That's right. So the 2nd of October is when the mail-in ballots will be going out, and then you'll have some time to be able to return them. But my advice is return them immediately. The Supreme Court recently has ruled that we can be able to accept ballots that were returned in the appropriate time period prior to the election, at up to 3 days after the election.
Right.
So even if it does arrive late, it may count. But why would you mess with this? We've seen all of the national stories about the post office. I know there's a fight by our Attorney General right now to be able to address those concerns, and Attorney Generals throughout the country. The idea of slowing up mail-in ballots, I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. I never thought I'd question the ideas about the post office, but it's been clear that has been a potential distraction as it relates to the processing of mail to get them in on time. In Pennsylvania, one way to ensure that your ballot is mailed in on time is when you get it, turn it around. Make sure you do what's appropriate. Make sure you fill out your form, your mail-in form. Put it in an envelope, make sure it's signed appropriately, and then put another envelope around it to ensure that it's going to be mailed in appropriately and does count. Again, a lot of these things trick you up. You want to ensure that you're doing everything as you're instructed through the mail-in ballot process. It's not that difficult. There are a number of locations, and all you'd have to do would be Google in Pennsylvania to the Department of State, how do I process my mail-in ballot appropriately? Take some time as you receive your mail-in ballot to look at the appropriate level of processing. It's not hard, it's not detailed, but you don't want to miss the actual signature that's required, the ability for you to be able to enclose it in the initial envelope and then mail it in the envelope that's provided. All those things are critical to ensure that your vote counts if you mail in.
Absolutely.
Let me, just to kind of get away from the statistics side, because, like I said, how I was in the last election, how, I was kind of more like nonchalant, whatever. Again, there are people out there that I know that had the same thoughts on the election as me. So let me ask you these two quick questions. One, what some advice like you have for people that are first-time voters, or even first-time like serious voters, I guess like myself? What's some advice you could give people? And the second one is, you're talking about like the challenges of how everything's kind of changing up a little bit. Can you kind of talk about like how difficult it can get when you try to like encourage people to vote, but also staying neutral that way, like you don't sway them one way or this way, but just to be able to let them know, hey, you got this power, be able to use it. Can you just talk about that?
Well, obviously, voting is a right that, as I talked about, that is so critically important. But there's also an importance of you being able to ensure your vote is cast, and regardless of your political affiliation, regardless of your beliefs, what makes America a great place, what makes Stilton a great place, what makes this country, obviously what it is the ability to have differing opinions and being able to ensure that when you cast your vote, you also cast your position and your opinion. And regardless of whether it's far left, far right, in the center, or anywhere in a variation of that, or with a a third-party candidate, you are allowing your voice to be a part of what is actually going to end up governing the country and or your local community. So I think you're referencing, regardless of where you come from, regardless of what your background is, regardless of how passionate you are about your views, those things are only going to be about talk in the shed, or talk in the barbershop, or talk in the bar room, if you don't exercise your right to vote. So in this election, we've already seen a record level of a turnout. We've seen 45,000 mail-in ballots to date. 45,000 applications to date. We don't know how many of those are going to be returned, but we expect that number to be even higher, which is it's incredible the amount of voters that have actually voted. We could have potentially up to 50% of the vote come in through mail-in, which is historic. And that mail-in process, to be able to verify, to count, to ensure that there's no duplications of votes, and to certify those ballots are a process that don't happen like they do on the machines. We've got to open each one of those ballots by hand. They need to certify that they haven't voted at any other part of the system, and then they need to accurately account for and ensure that those votes actually are counted. So that process is a very labor-intensive process that's going to require a great deal of planning, individual volunteers, and we suspect that with the number of votes that we've seen here in Dauphin County and we've seen throughout the state that are coming in and mail-in, it's a great option for you, particularly through the pandemic, but the election results won't be told to you on election night. We're used to seeing, following the CNN polls and watching 27 and 21 News, while they may be predicting what the machine totals are. We've already seen a huge increase in mail-in votes, and we've seen, quite frankly, if you want to talk sort of a breakdown, we've seen almost a 2.5 to 1 registration margin for Democrats voting in a mail-in side, where we expect, and you've heard this from the Trump campaign and from the Republican side, that the majority of Republicans are not trusting the mail-in process, and they're coming out to vote in person. So again, it's no indication of how the election's going to go, but we've seen a much higher rate of mail-in being done through the Democratic side, and we're expecting a larger turnout from the Republican side. So on the election night, I would expect to see Republicans doing very well, and then based upon the number of mail-in ballots, obviously that's going to even out related to what that count is. But we will not know, and this is certain, this is one thing you can take to the bank, we will not know on election night who our president is.
That's kind of crazy. I mean, that's probably the first time in history.
Well, there's been times that have been decided. If you remember the Al Gore election,
that's true.
That actually went down. And believe it or not, in the last 2 elections cycles, I believe that it wasn't the popular vote that had actually determined the outcome.
Right, it was the Electoral College.
Electoral College. So, the idea of the length of time. So not only do we have new processes, not only do we have a new mail-in process to count, not only do we have a new machines to count, but we will have the entire weight of the country and world probably focusing in on Pennsylvania and taking a look at what's happening right here in Dauphin County. So when you say your vote doesn't count, it does count, and as close as these margins are, and as close as these races are, right in the hometown and home area in which we live is probably going to have the single largest impact, and it's going to be the focal point of the national electorate. That's why we've seen Donald Trump here in Harrisburg just a couple days ago, and we've seen Biden in Harrisburg about a week and a half ago, and I think we're going to see these presidential candidates almost on a bi-weekly or weekly basis coming through Harrisburg and central Pennsylvania, because this is the swing state in one of the key battleground areas in a purple county. So again, it's time. If you haven't been excited or you don't think your vote matters, this is a historic election and one that you're going to want to be fully engaged in, because the outcome is going to be determined by those voters that are here.
That's the craziest thing, is people don't realize that. I mean, and it's kind of cool that it's here. Like, it's right here in Harrisburg that pretty much it's a big impact on what's going to happen. I mean, obviously we have a whole country that's going to decide, but it's fascinating to know that it's here. Like it's really here. So on that, when is it, or what? Just some facts for the folks. When is the deadline to vote? When's the deadline to register?
So October 19th would be your deadline to register to vote. You need to make sure that you request in an application to be able to register to vote. You can do it either through the Department of State, you can do it through the Dauphin County Elections Bureau, or you can do it at PennDOT when you go ahead and renew your driver's license.
Yep, I did that.
All three are options for you, but that needs to be done if you want to participate in this general election, this presidential year, by October 19th.
Okay. How about absentees and like all that? Or
So the last day to be able to request a mail-in ballot would be on the 27th of October. So remember, the election would be right around the corner. You'd want to do and request your mail-in ballot as soon as you possibly can. Again, you don't want it to not count. We talked about issues with the mail, trying to get to it as early as possible. Don't procrastinate, but your drop dead date is the 27th of October. And again, those ballots will be then accepted as long as they are postmarked by election day up until 3 days following the election. There's been, a Supreme Court ruling that allows us, based upon some of these issues, to actually accept the votes. Because normally, if they're not in the elections office by 8 p.m. on election night, they are not counted.
Right.
We have 3 days to be able to count those mail-in votes following the election, which, again, will delay those election results.
Right. Okay. So, any advice? I mean, again, this is going to be a neutral, more so answer, but of anything that we've talked about today, like what is the most important part of this election?
You can't bitch unless you get involved. You really can't complain unless you vote. And the idea of voting is a fundamental right and the foundation of our democracy. To participate in that, you have all the power. If you think your vote doesn't matter, you're wrong. Many votes have been decided, many elections have been decided by less than one vote. And to be able to ensure that your opinion and your view is heard in this representative democracy, you need to get out there to vote.
Damn. That's good stuff.
Yes, it is.
That's good stuff.
Damn right.
Yeah.
Thank you for stopping in today.
No,
seriously.
Yeah, definitely for sure. Because this is definitely something, like we talked about, especially with the younger generation. A lot of people being their first time voting, their first time seriously voting. Maybe they were misinformed. Like, this is something that can definitely be used for great knowledge, and they can use in the future as well to not only help themselves, but be able to tell somebody else, be able to say, hey, make sure you're registered to vote by this date. Did you do this? So, make sure you're out there pushing your friends, make sure they use this great power, like Spider-Man said, or Uncle Ben said, with great power come great responsibility. So, that is our responsibility, as George was saying, do be able to go out there and use our power to vote. So many people have fought for it, fought, clawed, scratched, died, they locked up, they did it all just so all of us in this room, everybody listening, can be able to have that opportunity to make a difference, to make a change. So, don't let that go by the wayside. Especially you're somebody out there like me where you might let it slide by the wayside the first time, might not take it that seriously. This is your chance at redemption. Make sure, you're able to bounce back from that. So again, we want to say thank you, George. Yeah. For this knowledge, for this information, greatly appreciate it. Got anything last you want to say for people before we hop into the final shed thought?
Just appreciate being invited to the shed.
You're always welcome here.
Great to talk to two young guys who are trying to inform the community about important topics. I know you've been a lot about trying to bring some level of entertainment value and knowledge, but trying to talk about a serious topic. Hopefully, we'll take the shed to a new level as a source of good information. And for me, it was time well spent being able to see both deer horns, being able to chill in Bresser, Pennsylvania, and being able to be with two engaged individuals, hopefully that are going to be able to talk to another generation about the importance of voting. And also, it has been the younger generation that has defined, sort of how national elections have gone. So couldn't be on a more important topic and couldn't be with a greater set of guys. We appreciate you stopping by.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you. So,
and now with that said, the part you guys wait for, funnest part, the best part, the final shed thought. Final shed thought will be brought to you by yours truly this week. And so basically with every kind of, to bring it all together, everything that George had talked about, we sat here and talked about with him. My final chef thought for y'all this week is don't talk about it, be about it. Because like George said, you can't bitch and complain if you're not out there trying to actively change something that's wrong. If you want to be that person that makes the change in your community, that makes the change in that young person's life, like how George was talking about how he was able to reform the correction system so that way young men and women can be able to have a better opportunity to get them on a straight path. If you want to be able to just go help people, man, or you want to be a part of history, because that's all we're talking about, how historical this election is. You heard George say how many mail-in ballots are coming in, how one vote can make a difference. And it's, use that power and just don't talk about it. Go be about it. Go do it. That's what I got for y'all.
Love that. It's a great point. Well,
Boom.
On that, we like you.
Whoa.
Whoa.
The fuck? See the fuck? Yeah, I'll tell you. Anyways, before we get out of here, we got two things to address. Boom. So
Tried to take it from him, but
terrible.
can never do that. That's his line. All right.
Boom. And then before we get out of here, George, can you tell people where to find you, where they can keep up with what you're doing? They can see how you're changing the community, how you're being a difference in the world.
Yeah, you can get me through the ability to communicate with me at DauphinCounty.org. You can communicate, and there's a direct link to me on the website. I have a Twitter handle at Hartwick III, and I obviously have I can't deal with this thing. I obviously have a Facebook site as well. So either you can DM me, you can hit me up on Twitter, or you can email me directly through the county.
Y'all heard it. He's definitely the first guest that we probably heard say he's official on a local website. So make sure to use that, especially y'all have any further. I know you probably wouldn't mind if somebody reached out to you, had a couple questions for you,
Well, look, I'm here to serve the citizens of the community, so I get concerns every day and night. I'm also, some folks don't understand, I do every one of the jobs I've already been a part of and worked. I always hear my dad, and I don't know if this is appropriate to say it this time, but he said if the damn Lehigh engineers would have listened to the steel workers, maybe they would have been able to turn a profit at the steel mill. So I have actually set out, and even this week, I'm working with our protective service unit this week of our aging department. So
Right.
I get calls for people who are in mental health crisis, people who are suffering with drug and alcohol issues. One quick message if I can leave you with, and this is serious to me, and this is actually probably, the communication and conversation from the shed for the day. My dad told me when I was growing up that somehow if you asked for help, you were somehow weak. You were less than a man. And the idea of carrying that burden on my shoulders, I realized as I get older, that's probably some of the worst advice. While my dad's a great guy, it's probably the worst advice I could have ever gotten, because some of us who are struggling with drug and alcohol issues, mental health issues, I've lost 4 friends in the last year and a half of suicide. And in 2 of their suicide notes, they said, George, you can explain this, you know me. I know that if somebody does struggle with a mental health or drug and alcohol issue, that it's okay not to be okay. We have all struggled through issues, and we have family members. We've all been through significant issues. So, number one, first of all, drop the stigma of trying to have somebody shunned or feel embarrassed or less than because they're coming forth and they have the strength and courage to ask for help. That's number one. We all need to be able to do that. Number two, if somebody does come to you to ask you for help, we have an obligation to make sure that they get access and directly to the person that can help them, whether it's Dauphin County Drug and Alcohol Service Providers, a mental health provider. The world's better with you in it, and the biggest strength and the strongest people I know are the ones that have been able to humble themselves and ask for help. So today, if you need any kind of help, please make sure you ask, and we want to support you. We want to see the world with you in it.
Absolutely. I say the same thing. I mean, I struggle myself, so I get it. So you can always reach out to us as well. So
Yes, sir. That was actually good.
That was awesome.
Look at that. Y'all got 2 shed thoughts.
I don't mean to make it stretch all that.
Nah,
Obviously,
no, that was good. Nah, that's definitely something
But if we can save a life,
Yeah,
if somebody's
yes,
struggling
sir.
with help.
life is way
Yes,
more
sir.
important with everybody in it.
Yes,
So,
sir.
where can they find you, actually?
Sir, no,
You
where
want
can
me
they-
to go?
yes.
All right. Well,
This guy, man, tell you.
so you can find me across the board at Tony Shed Talk. You can obviously find our Facebook page as well, Shed Talk Podcast. Find us on Instagram, Twitter. Find us on YouTube. You know where to find us. How about you?
Find me, Nate Monroe, full 5 on Instagram. You can find me at N_Monroe26 on Twitter. And, of course, twitch.tv/Monroe26. I bring high quality
Promoting your
Madden
damn
entertainment.
gaming.
Use that free.
Put up gang signs.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Use that free
gaming. Oh.
Twitch Prime sub on your boy. Shit, you never know. Might be able to help out with the podcast, too. But,
Got a point.
as always, again, we appreciate George. Shout out to homie Neil. Shout out everybody listening. We like you. We love you. You love us. We like you. As George said, man, don't be afraid to ask for help because the world is a better place with you in it. And until we shed again.